You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and joining me today, as always, on a Monday is Chris. How's it going today, Chris?
I'm good. How are you doing? It's good seeing you.
Yeah, good to see you too. It's been a minute, so always good to reconnect. And in good timing, because the 49ers today started off the legal tampering period with a big bang. I, for one, was not expecting them to go this hard, this fast, but man, did they do it. They signed former Eagles defensive tackle Javon Hargrave to a 4-year deal, $84 million. He's now the third highest in average per year among all current interior defensive linemen in the NFL, fourth highest total value contract among interior defensive linemen. Eric Armstead is the third highest, and fifth among interior defensive linemen. So what do you think about this deal, first of all?
I'm hyped. I wasn't expecting the Niners to make a splash like this. I thought they would maybe do, maybe several, or I shouldn't say several, maybe a few like B-list, B/C list kind of like development type, players who've been in the league that maybe they didn't, shine per se, or they had, moments where they shined on their current teams, and then the Niners were able to bring them over and do a reclamation project or something.
Yeah.
So that's my first initial thought. My additional thought that I had about it was it reminds me a lot about the Charvarius Ward pickup, how the Niners, on day one of free agency last year made a splash, in an area where they thought they had a need, right? Granted, it wasn't like I don't think many people believe that the Niners had like a lot of like needs this year, maybe depth. There was concerns about players potentially leaving the free agency and such, but it's evident with this move to me that the Niners felt that they really needed to do something in a more significant way in the interior defensive line, and they addressed it in a major way. I mean, shoot, Hargrave was on. He was like the number one on many different analysts, free agency boards overall, if not just, much less, just defensive tackles. So I was not expecting it when Daron Payne got paid, and then the other cat from New Orleans, when he got his deal with New Orleans, when he came back, I'm like, that market is gonna. I didn't think that the Niners would be willing to put down some money like that. You know what I'm saying? But hey, I'm hype about it right now. I think we're gonna be in some cap situations when some bills start coming due in a year or two, or maybe even next year. But that's in the future. But for right now, I'm really excited. The dude stays healthy. He's a huge impact player. Even in the time that we were sitting here, some other movements happened with the Eagles. So their defense is kind of, I don't want to say in shambles, but they're definitely losing some starters. But
aside from how this move helps the 49ers, because that's evident, there are other things that I like about it. One, you are also making your opponent, one of your biggest opponents in the NFC, weaker in the Eagles, and they have lost in all three levels of their defense. They have lost Marcus Epps, their safety, TJ Edwards, and Javon Hargrave. So they're taking some hits right now on their defense. So there's going to be some turnover there for sure. Can't expect the same outcome, I think, for that defense. So the 49ers get a little bit richer in the process. And you mentioned also the health. He's missed a total of 3 games in 7 years. So, and only 2 of those were injury related. So really, he's missed 2 games due to injury in 7 years. And that exactly is what the 49ers need more of, right? Because the 49ers tend to, bring in guys who have had history of, injuries. One example, Javon Kinlaw, that hasn't really worked out for them. This is a big admittance that, that was not the right move. That was not a great pick for them. And, one indication was the fact that they weren't going to do his 5th-year option, Javon Kinlaw. And so this kind of helps remedy that a bit. I mean, and also to be healthy for this team is going to be huge. So the 49ers, to get that experience, to get that health, someone who's so disruptive. I mean, there were people sharing the numbers of how many pressures he got. I believe last season it was like 55 or something like that. I think the next highest on the 49ers last season was Eric Armstead with 20. I think combined, they had like 65 or something as a unit, the 49ers did. And here comes Hargrave, who had 55 this past season on his own. So that tells you right there just the impact this is potentially going to have on this defensive line. I mean, Nick Bosa is going to eat. Everyone else on this line is going to eat. Kevin Givens is also back. I believe that was a 1-year deal for him. 2.1 million deal, 2 million guaranteed. So congrats to Kevin Givens. That's a great signing, after the Hargrave news. So, the 49ers are in a good spot. Again, we saw Hassan Ridgeway get the Texans. So, but again, I wanted Ridgeway to come back, but with Hargrave coming, it doesn't, it's a moot point. It doesn't even matter.
Sure.
Now, the other signing that we recently got a little bit ago was Sam Darnold on a 1-year deal. The 49ers signed him. That Steve Wilkes, the San Francisco pipeline is real. So Sam Darnold is the quarterback that the 49ers bring in. And now it's a quarterback room of Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold. Now, I'm not opposed to this signing. I think this makes a ton of sense for both sides. Remember, we've been saying for quite a while that the type of quarterback that comes in to this situation, it's kind of twofold. For one, it has to be a quarterback who is willing to come into this kind of uncertain situation of, well, are you going to be the backup or are you going to be the third string? Most likely the third string with maybe no chance of even ever starting. And also, we've been saying that it's an indication of how the 49ers feel about their quarterback situation with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So Sam Darnold, this is kind of a reclamation project in a way, right? I mean, with Steve Wilkes as head coach, he went 4-2 in Carolina last year, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. There's potential there, but as of right now, he just hasn't really made a lot with his opportunities. So going to the 49ers is kind of a win-win in his eyes, I could imagine, to get the opportunity to play with Kyle Shanahan and have these weapons, and also, I don't think it's threatening to, either quarterback, Brock Purdy or Trey Lance, right? Now, I've been saying if Trey Lance can't beat Sam Darnold, we have issues, right? That's not a good sign for Trey Lance. But Trey Lance was drafted highly. We are still hoping that he can be a guy for this team. So hopefully, Sam Darnold can give him a bit of a push as well, because I know Brock Purdy has. So we'll just see what he does with that. But how are you feeling about this signing?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I would say that there have been rumors in the past that the Niners have had interest in Sam Darnold. I think what Sam Darnold brings you is a guy. He reinforces your QB room. He brings you a guy that's won some games. Clearly, by virtue of the fact that he's kind of like a journeyman at this point. Hasn't been an All Pro or Pro Bowler or anything of that nature, but I think that he raises the floor in your QB room from a backup perspective. To your point that you said earlier, we've talked about before, we needed to go and get someone who was, going to be okay with being that, third or second, and then ultimately third once everyone got healthy kind of position player. So, I think that, and we've also talked about as well, like, Shanahan's system is a QB friendly system also. So I feel that, Shanahan has felt for a couple of years now that in my system, Sam Darnold will be enough to get by, and he may not even see the field. Now if recent history is prologue, then maybe he will, but hopefully he does not, because that means that we've also had to go through some significant injuries yet again. But at any rate, I'm cool with it. I think that given the other options out there, whether it's going to the draft or whatever. I mean, the Niners needed to make a move, and they made their move. They went and got their guy on the first day of the tampering period. So as opposed to waiting to see who fell to them, so they feel that this is who they wanted. So I'm cool with it if they are.
Yeah, and I wanted to share this tweet that Warren Sharp posted a little bit ago. He said the Sam Darnold signing is interesting for the 49ers. Carolina's offense took a lot of deep shots, and he was terrible on those attempts. But the SF offense does not take such deep shots. And Darnold showed efficiency when throwing underneath in Carolina, similar to 49ers quarterback. So, for the people who are watching on YouTube, you can see what I'm sharing here. And he's been pretty efficient in passes thrown within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. And that's pretty much what 49ers quarterbacks are asked to do. So this seems like an ideal situation for him and all those involved. Sorry, I forgot I had the frame going, so that looks a little funky, but you guys get what I was talking about there. And to your point, Chris, I still feel like the 49ers will bring in a quarterback after the draft, either via the draft, the late round pick, or an undrafted free agent, just because they've had so much, injury bad luck at the position that, just having extra bodies are going to be able to insulate them. So while they'll carry 3 quarterbacks most likely to the 53, they're going to have someone on the practice squad as well. So I think, bringing a quarterback in after the draft is not out of the question. And I'm excited. Someone mentioned a guy that I interviewed actually on my channel, Tim DeMorat out of Fordham. And you guys should check that interview out. It's on my channel. Because that's a intriguing option, I think, as a UDFA. But whoever they bring in, I think probably end up on the practice squad. Just more depth. They need it. We got 10 people in here. What's going on, everyone? Make sure you guys like this video. Make sure you subscribe if you have not yet. We're talking about all the moves that happened today with the 49ers. Now, let's talk about Mike McGlinchey. Mike McGlinchey got a payday. Oh, my God. No wonder the 49ers were out on Mike McGlinchey from the start. I mean, he got a massive deal, 5 years worth $87.5 million, $50 million guaranteed. Wow.
He got more than Jimmy. He got more money than Jimmy.
The offensive line market is insane, at least for the tackles. I mean, good for him. He goes to the Broncos. So, they're trying to replenish that offensive line out there in Denver. So I think that makes sense to, pay that much for Mike McGlinchey. Hey, get your bag, man. Get your bag.
I got
one.
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts there. So I think, for one, I mean, and some people are even calling the Hargrave deal an overpay, but I don't know. I think the dude's worth it. And there were rumors that he actually turned down more money to come to the Niners, but I think it's between the Niners and the Browns. But I think there's a few things that people need to take into consideration when they see the dollars associated with Mike McGlinchey's deal. So first of all, we're familiar with the fact that there's not a tremendous amount of above average line play that's happening out there. I will say I was surprised the Bears didn't get him with all of the money that they have and available to them. But it appears to me that maybe the Bears and the Broncos, got in a little bit of a bidding war, and the Broncos just came out on top. So that might be why that number is kind of like ticked up a little bit.
Yeah.
And also we're being realistic. McGlinchey was one of the more coveted free agents this cycle. So all that combined, I mean, I think that's where it results in those dollar figures. But that's a lot. It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. In hindsight, I'm glad it's not the 49ers paying it. They seem okay using that money elsewhere. Example in Hargrave, I rather that. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo is another guy who, got a big payday today. He is an Oakland Raider, 3-year deal, $67.5 million. So, he got the bag too. It ended up being a win-win situation for Jimmy Garoppolo, sticking around with the 49ers one extra year. It seemed to have really helped him. Despite some teams waiting for Aaron Rodgers, he still got a deal, and it makes sense, him going to the Raiders and reuniting with McDaniels.
I'm kind of, it does make sense from that standpoint. I'm kind of interesting if Jimmy and his camp took the Raiders deal as like a bird in the hand approach, or prospect of playing with Devontae Adams, McDaniels, Darren Waller, because I'm surprised he didn't get more money, to be honest. So that might surprise some people, but I'm not saying I'm not a Jimmy truther by any stretch, but on the same token, I mean, shoot, Daniel Jones's deal was twice that, right? So, I'm just kind of, in comparison, I'm just kind of surprised that he didn't get more money. He may have actually turned down more money potentially to go play with Vegas. Who knows? But yeah, but good for him. We can officially say, appreciate Jimmy for all the teammate that he was and the leadership he provided and such. As John Lynch said, it kind of ran its course, and these things happen in the business, right? And he'll be banging up against Russell Wilson again, in Denver and stuff. So it'll be interesting to watch. And honestly, one thing I will mention, last thing I'll mention about Jimmy in this respect is we want Jimmy to do well. We want Jimmy to play.
We do.
We want him to do well, because that enhances the comp pick that will come in return for his contract potentially. So and hey, maybe Jimmy takes out the Chiefs. Who knows? Wouldn't that be something crazy? But we'll see.
Yeah, that's a good point about the comp picks. I mean, the 49ers have always been in the business of, letting guys go so they recoup, comp picks in the process. I mean, they got 7 comp picks, that was announced a couple of days ago, which is insane. They have a total of 11 picks. So that's kind of what they like to do, how they play, free agency as well. Now, the Hargrave and McGlinchey deals, I think, kind of balance each other out. They cancel each other out, I should say. And so, to your point, Jimmy Garoppolo is the one to keep an eye on for, the comp pick that the 49ers may get back. Could be a 3rd round, could be a 4th round pick next season. So yeah, we're rooting for Jimmy Garoppolo. Him getting this deal is a good thing for us, right? So, it indicates that he'll have a solid role with this team, and it's good that he's going back to McDaniels, who has coached him before, who he has had success with. So hey, it's all good if we get that comp pick back. And that's why I said it's a win-win for both sides, because the 49ers, they didn't have to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. They get something in return for him anyway. Yes, it is a year later after he leaves the free agency, but you get something in return anyway, better than not getting anything. So, yeah, I like that pick. A couple of guys that the 49ers brought back before this legal tampering period began. Deshaun Gibson back on a 1-year deal, $2.9 million. I want to talk about that really quick, Chris, because what do you think this means? Does this mean that Jimmy Ward is definitely gone? How do you interpret this? I know we've been talking about the possibility of Gibson coming back for a while now. So what do you think?
Yeah, so first, I think that I'm excited about Tashaun Gibson coming back. I know he was flirting with, retirement, said a lot of, really glowing things about his relationship with Talanoa Hufanga. So that's awesome. So the chemistry is already there. They're just going to build upon it even more. I really hope that, the clock doesn't strike 12 and he turns into a pumpkin. I know he's a little, up there in age, you know what I mean? So hopefully his body holds up. He still has the production that he had last year. It's interesting with Jimmy Ward, right? Because, he had the Instagram live that he did 2-3 weeks ago, whatever. But then not too long ago, he made a comment, several days ago, he made a comment that he may be willing to come back and play nickel for the Niners. So I don't know. I don't know that this is it totally writes the book on what's going to happen next with Jimmy Ward. It'll probably be, a matter of dollar signs in that regard. But Jimmy wants to get paid. So, I don't know that Tashaun Gibson's what's the word? His signing impacts Jimmy in that regard. But I think the market, I think, is going to tell Jimmy where he's at, right? Like, I think the market will tell Jimmy whether, because of his play at nickel, that teams want him at nickel, or they're willing to have him go back to safety, right? So we'll probably I see Jimmy kind of being one of those that we'll have to kind of look further into free agency to see where he lands, and may circle back with us.
Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, it seems like the 49ers are kind of, keeping their options open, doing some due diligence on some guys. Justina Anderson earlier today reported that Jaguars corner Trey Herndon,
Yep.
who is a nickel corner, is someone the 49ers are interested in. And, that was a head scratcher at first when I heard that, because I'm like, okay, they already have Lenore who can play nickel. They already have Womack. Why bring in another nickel? But, it really makes sense when you think about the fact that, if they don't bring a guy like Jimmy Ward back, they may still need a nickel, or sorry, if they don't bring Emmanuel Mosley back, actually I think is what it hinges on, because if Mosley comes back, and I think there's some interest in bringing Mosley back, if Mosley doesn't come back, then you have Lenore on the outside, just like he finished the season, and then you have Womack at the nickel, which I'm not convinced that they like Womack starting at the nickel quite yet, at least. I mean, maybe it seems like he still has some things to prove there. So bringing in the guy, then maybe a Trey Herndon makes sense. So I think they're just keeping their options open and seeing what happens. But I personally, I would like Emmanuel Mosley to come back, and I think a lot kind of hinges on that. Now, if so, they brought Sean Gibson back, 1-year deal, as we mentioned. They still have to draft a safety, right? I mean, you want to have a guy
that question,
yeah.
Steph. What is Quantrez Knight? What role is he? A nickel or is he a safety? Because I know he's still around too.
I thought he was like
I'll look him up.
Yeah, I had him. I always forget too. I think he's a safety.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you though. Yeah, I do believe that you still have to reinforce that safety spot, just simply because Deshaun Gibson's probably only around for
sorry.
year.
Well, sorry to interrupt. I'm looking at David Lombardi's spreadsheet, the 90-man depth chart. He has Quantrez Knight as a nickel corner.
Okay.
So I guess that's an option too, right? They have options, and a lot of these DBs that they have can move around several different places. They kind of like to move their guys around, it seems, or at least have the option, right? So who knows? I think there's still some work to be done in that secondary, despite Gibson coming back for that deal. And I think they still draft a safety personally. I just think it makes sense to groom your safety of the future, because after all, Gibson's only back on a 1-year deal. You wouldn't want to bring him back after that, for the point that we mentioned. He's up there in age. He's already mulled retirement. So, you want to keep it at 1-year deal, but bringing in a rookie, I think, to kind of groom in the process for that 1 year would be ideal.
No, I agree with you. And I think the Niners, I like to see, once we land with the 53 and the season gets off, and we see what the depth chart looks like, I'll be interested to see kind of like what players from the practice squad or that didn't play much this year really see a lot of playing time. What I mean to say all of that, I say all that to say it'll be interesting to see if the Niners are really starting to work on like how do I say this? If they're starting to like cement themselves as really kind of having like a red shirt type system, if you will, kind of like the Aaron Banks, right?
Yeah,
it'll be really curious to see that, because I really want to see Kalia Davis out there. I'm curious to see what he looks like. Jason Poe. I know Levin Black talks about, I think he's made some comments about Quantrez Knight before. So I'm really curious to see, maybe the Niners, that's their process, right? Because last year we were all kind of like, where's Aaron Banks? You drafted him high and so on and so forth. And then this year he comes and plays solid. So maybe that's kind of like the plan. And it would make sense considering the roster and how it's constructed, right? It's going to be really hard. It's really hard for rookies to come in and just, be impact players day one as currently constructed. So it may make sense to allow them that year to develop and then hit the ground running the second year.
And I kind of feel like that's what the 49ers have realized over time, that, this is a win now roster, and you can't always count on these rookies to just come in and be ready and take you to where you need to go. You know what I mean? So I think they've kind of insulated themselves in a way where, okay, we could still draft these guys, but have them, learn the system for a year, and then next season they're ready to, take on a bigger role, potentially a starting role, at the very least compete, right? So yeah, that kind of feels like how they like to operate these last couple years from what I've noticed. I just want to answer this question from Ricardo. He said, how much was Steve Wilks, that is, presence a factor for signing Darnold?
It had to have mattered.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the fact that we mentioned the 49ers did have interest, or have had interest in Darnold in the past. I believe they even liked him coming out of the draft. But, I definitely
probably co-signed it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And, he gave the glowing endorsement, I'm sure. And as I mentioned, Darnold went 4-2 with Wilks as the interim head coach. 8.2 yards per attempt. That was a career high for him. So yeah, you could just speak to who he is as a person, as a player. Like, yeah, he can handle this role. He would do well. And as we mentioned, this is a weird situation, right? For any quarterback who's going to come in, a little uncertainty on where you kind of fall on the depth chart, right? He kind of, I'm sure, had to give some endorsement on he can handle this. It's not going to affect him mentally or anything like that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it did have a big something to do with it. And one thing Matt Barrows pointed out a little bit ago, Sam Darnold, 25 years old, Brock Purdy, 23, Trey Lance, 22. This is a very, very young group of quarterbacks. And the best part about it, cost controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Cost control them.
Have you seen the deal yet, or the numbers yet? Or
no, I don't think they've posted the numbers yet.
I was just curious.
I've been on the lookout, but yeah, no numbers yet. I'm also curious about that because I think that'll say a lot. But I think I would assume it's cost controlled, right? Because I guess that will tell us a lot about how they view him. But I can't imagine him getting a whole lot. But we'll just have to wait and see. I would assume that it's going to be, a team friendly-ish deal, just given what we expect his role to be on this team. Right. And that's ideal.
I think that I agree with you. And I think that I've seen some comments about, there's always going to be people who are on both sides of the issue and coin, right? I've seen some people who are just like, oh goodness, like not Sam Darnold, but if we're being honest with ourselves, it was going to be somebody, right? It was going to be someone of the ilk of Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, Mitch Trubisky, someone there, or on the other end of the spectrum, Carson Wentz, Andy Dalton, Matt Ryan. So it was going to be someone. Lynch made it very clear that they were going to go after a vet to insulate that room. And personally, Darnold, Mariota, someone, that ilk, I'm cool with that. I mean, I would have even been fine with Jameis Winston, but I think Jameis is going to want to start somewhere, which I think he should get another opportunity to do so. So as we've said before, I mean, we had to be okay with someone who was willing to come to us and be that third guy. And, maybe it's not, maybe it's a circumstance where like, Mark Mariota was backing up Carr and then got a starting gig in Atlanta. Trubisky was in Buffalo, got a starting gig in Washington, I think it was after that. But so maybe that's what Darnold's trying to do. But at any rate, like I'm cool with it. I think I feel really good about how this day has gone so far.
Me too. I'm surprised that the 49ers have made this many moves, which I guess it's only been 2, but like the magnitude of these moves so far this fast. I mean, it's only been since noon or so, since the legal tampering period began. And the 49ers were one of the first teams to make a move with the Hargrave signing.
Yeah, so people are saying that's the best signing so far, like analysts and stuff.
It's hard to argue. I mean, I really like it just because, I mean, the 49ers defense was already stacked, but you have one weakness on that defensive line, and they addressed it, and that's going to make everything else easier. You're going to see how just that one move is going to make it's going to have a huge trickle-down effect.
I agree.
Wait and see. Brian Culp says, Mitch Wishnowsky the like button. I hope that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing, right? Let's hit that like. Let's hit that like. And we're gonna keep it rolling here.
I have a question for you, Steph.
Yeah.
What do you think one Javon signing means for the other Javon signing.
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned it. Like, I think them bringing Hargrave in is an admission that, yeah, that Kinlaw drafting Kinlaw was not what we thought it was going to be. And on top of them not, bringing him back for the 5th-year option. So they're moving on. They're moving on. And if you're going to move on, this is how you do it. If you're going to admit that you were wrong, do it with a bang like this. You know what I mean? So I think all is well, because I saw some people talking about, well, they could have just not traded Eric Armstead and all that. But, the 49ers did what they felt they needed to do in order to, bring other guys back on extensions. It happens. I don't know if they regret, trading Eric Armstead. They probably regret.
Oh, Buckner. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Buckner.
No, you're good. Yeah, I got you.
But they probably regret replacing him or his spot with a rookie, and that rookie being Javon Kinlaw, right? And that's my point. Like, I think they're noticing, or they're realizing, you can't always depend on your draft picks to be ready right out the gate. And maybe it isn't just the fact that they're starting right away that, hinders their growth or something like that. But I think it helps to let them have that 1 year to kind of like soak in the system first before they, start and all that. So, but, I saw some people talking about Drake Jackson and thinking that this is some kind of indictment on Drake Jackson as well, or if the 49ers brought in an edge rusher, that's some indication on how they feel about Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson is going to have a role in this team, regardless if they bring another guy in or not. And I do think they're going to bring another guy in as an edge rusher. The 49ers love to have a rotation. They love to have a number of guys who can, rush off the edge. And so Drake Jackson, he's going to be part of that mix. He showed very well this past season. I think the biggest knock had nothing to do with his talent. It was just the fact that his conditioning, he wasn't really ready for a 20-game season, and that's totally understandable for a rookie. But yeah, I think they still have a lot of belief in him. Whether they bring another edge rusher or not, Drake Jackson's still gonna, have his opportunities. So that's my thought on that. I don't know if you had any thoughts on Drake Jackson.
I agree. I think that honestly, it actually would help, in my opinion, Drake Jackson in the manner in which, to have a true, and, I know not always are we expecting the, defensive tackles to be, true pass rushers, more so run defenders and so on. But at any rate, to have someone like Javon Hargrave who actually can get out of the quarterback, collapse the pocket, and get that push the quarterback out of the pocket, I see that actually Drake Jackson benefiting from that. Everyone really, but Drake Jackson actually benefiting from that. So, and I agree, there's a lot of the defenses had a lot of different packages. They like to be deep on the defensive line, bring those defenders at quarterbacks and running backs in waves. So I think that I don't think this is an indictment on Drake Jackson whatsoever. I think it just looks to help improve him. And I think at all levels of the defense, really. I mean, I'm really excited to see how Steve Wilks deploys the defense. I think there's going to be some more moves as well. Not necessarily blockbuster ones like the Hargrave one, but certainly some other additional players that could come over, surprise cuts maybe that people sign with, the Niners. And I'm really curious to see how it all comes together, right? Because when you have that true pass rush, and you have that true ability to get after the quarterback and create those pressures, behind them, they will benefit as well. So I think this is awesome. I think it's looking good so far.
Yeah, I mean, Hargrave, like you said, definitely a good guy to learn from. Everyone on that defensive line, all the starters are good guys to learn from for some of these younger guys. So I'm really excited about that. And Chris Kosarek is going to have just the ball. He's going to have a really good time this season with all the weapons that he has on that defensive line, and they're just going to eat. Look, another guy that the 49ers brought back before this whole tampering period began was Colton McKivitz, right? I mean, 2-year deal, 5.8 million, 2.9 APY. I like that. I'm not opposed to it at all, just because some people have been saying he could compete. If that's the number for your right tackle, and let's just say he becomes like a serviceable starting right tackle, I'm not giving him the job already, but I'm saying if he does for some reason become that guy, that's a good price for a starting guy on your offensive line. And like I said, he's going to have a chance to compete if he does become that guy. It's on a really good team friendly deal, I think.
No, for sure. And I think that kind of speaks to what we've kind of talked about before, that, if Mike McGlinchey were to go, which, obviously we talked about it earlier, he did, some of the answers might be on the team already. They may be in-house, right? And to your point, that's not a significant, contract by any stretch. So whether it's, drafting someone, to have him compete against, or, still, signing someone in free agency or something like that has a similar type deal. I just think it's an opportunity. They've obviously seen enough in him to keep him around. And again, he may be the guy next year. We'll see. Not to give him the job, as you said, but at the very least, if it does develop into him being the starter, I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, especially considering the fact that I can't remember what the APY for McGlinchey's deal is. But it's going to be significantly higher than what Colton McKivitz's, APY is. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like the 49ers may choose to go the cheaper route for the right tackle. I still expect there be some other moves there for the offensive line. Maybe they draft a guy. Maybe they bring in a free agent as well. Who knows? I know, like, I've been hearing that or seeing, reports and whatnot that 49ers would be interested in a center, right? I mean, they're interested in Jake Brendel still, among other teams. There are a lot of teams who are still interested in Jake Brendel. So the 49ers, if they want him back, going to have to, do some negotiating there and beat out some other teams, which I don't know if they ultimately end up doing. But I also saw reports that, the center market is not as high as it was originally thought it was going to be. So that could help the 49ers, whether it is in bringing Brendel back or, getting another free agent center out there. So I think that move is probably coming next. It could be one that they slow play a little bit. But I would expect, in the coming days, we probably hear something about an offensive lineman, most likely a center. And there's a lot of good edge rushers out there too. I know we talked about it. There's some good names out there that I think the 49ers can bring in. They love a good rotation. So there's options out there that I definitely like for them.
Yeah, and but the fact that the team's making moves on this first day, already as constructed, the Niners have a great roster, right? What I like about it just reinforces the fact that, in my opinion, I could be, I'm obviously biased, but the Niners are proving themselves to be an attractive spot for vets, or an attractive spot for people for players who want to, compete, be playing meaningful games in December and January. And that's exciting because, there have been times during this regime with Shanahan and Lynch where I've been kind of frustrated after free agency or at the trade deadline. The last couple of years, I've not felt that way, right? So, this is great. I think that that Lynch, Shanahan, the supporting staff, scouting and so on, they're doing their thing. They're earning their money right now, and I'm excited about the draft too, because when you have such high power players at every level of the defense, for instance, we're just talking about defense right now. I mean, going and just drafting for depth, and some of those guys are going to hit like, oh my God, like,
you get best player available,
right?
And that's the best strategy in the draft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree. Letting the board fall to them a little bit. And to your point earlier, with all the draft picks, I do see themselves maybe moving up a little bit or moving around the board a little bit. It's going to be an exciting summer for sure.
A great example of a team who has like done BPA in the draft are the Chiefs, and they
Yeah.
every year these past few years, it just seems like they've had someone who has no business falling to them,
Yeah.
fall to them, like, and they
Yeah.
get so lucky. And so the 49ers kind of have the same luxury if they choose to do that, with 11 picks, and they can even move up if they want to. Because obviously 11 picks for this team is too much, right? Like, you don't also want to be in a situation where you bring in so many guys and then you end up having to cut them at roster cuts for nothing, right? So,
Right.
um,
Exactly.
bringing in what you need, I think is important, but also going, best player available. Now, speaking of, the 49ers kind of having this allure to them, and, players wanting to come to the 49ers. One guy who's out there is OBJ. And we've, it's been years now with Odell Beckham being an option for the 49ers, right? It feels like. And so once again, OBJ's out there. He held the workout for teams. 49ers were one of the teams who were there. This free agent class for wide receivers is not the best.
No one
That
moved
being
today. Yeah.
no one moved today, and I think that it's for that reason, right? No one wants to one. I think everyone's a little scarred from the Christian Kirk thing because last season the Jags just went all out for Christian Kirk, and it kind of just hurt the wide receiver market. So now everyone's probably like, we're not paying anyone this time. Let's see what happens. But OBJ's out there, probably the best wide receiver available, and that's just the state of the wide receiver free agent class. What do you think about the 49ers bringing in OBJ? I know in the past it'd be like, yo, let's do it, but now I don't know. It's not that I wouldn't be excited. I'm just like, I think I'm kind of over the dream. I don't know about
Yeah,
you.
I was kind of talking to my brother Brandon about this actually this weekend. And he was talking from a standpoint of like value. What value would he bring that we don't already have? I think,
Yeah.
Given the offense that Shanahan runs or has run thus far, there's not a lot of sets in which there's three receivers deployed in that regard. Um, you made an interesting comment, kind of being over the dream. I'm kind of there as well. Sure, if we were to land him, I'd be like, okay, let's go. But on the same token, before it was like my mindset was more so, all right, let's try to see if we can put together a package to get OBJ. He's trying to get out of New York, or the Rams may not bring him back, and he tore his ACL, of course. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what that looked like. It's not going to be cheap. Obviously, he's not taking a team-friendly deal. So in that respect, I don't know that it's even a realistic, proposition. I have seen reports that, the Niners have, kind of reached out to him, which makes sense. And speaking with my brother about this, actually, I was telling him, you take the call, you make the call and see what you can, potentially make happen. Maybe, if OBJ, I'm not sure where he's at in his career, if he wants to be on the outside, the X and Y, or if he wants to be a slot receiver and such, predominantly. But I think him in the slot, with the weapons that we have on the outside, would be pretty dangerous. Of course, we do have Juwan Jennings, who's a big slot in that regard. So I'd be curious to know what it's about. I don't know that the Niners are going to trick anyone from a smokescreen standpoint, if that makes sense. Like, they were there. There have been reports that they've reached out. So I still think that there is some interest. So I'm gonna be interested. I'll be interested to see. I'm actually kind of interested that, I'm not interested. I'm actually kind of surprised that like we haven't already heard of like, with this, tampering period already opening up, of conversations that OBJ's been having with teams. Of course, he's been able to sign with anyone all off season because he didn't have he wasn't signed anywhere. But even so, I'm still kind of surprised at what that looks like. It kind of seems like the market is saying that they're kind of waiting and seeing with him.
It seems like all teams are slow playing the wide receiver market, which, I'm not opposed to. Bryant here says, if you bring in OBJ, you look to trade BA, Brandon Ayuk. I don't know if I agree with that, although, the 49ers are in a situation that we know they may look to trade one of their 2 wide receivers in Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel because you can't pay both, or it's likely you won't be able to pay both. What do you think about that? Like, do you think if
So
they bring in OBJ, it means like Ayuk is probably out the door? Or
I think it depends on the money. So for one, I think that some teams may be gun shy with OBJ right now because he's torn the same ACL twice, right?
yeah,
So that might be one reason why there hasn't been much traction there yet. And then as it relates to Brandon Ayuk, there's some reality there in the sense that I think May 1st is when we have to determine to pick up his fifth year option, which is going to happen, right? And I don't know that you look to trade Brandon Ayuk because I think that there are some other high salaries on the squad, right? That moves can happen other places. And as it relates to potentially having to trade, or move Brandon Ayuk. And nothing's to say that you have to do it right away because again, like he still could play on that 5th year option, right? So unless he comes to the team and says, "I need a deal, I want a long-term deal," but all things considered, perfect. Brandon Ayuk's going to his 4th year, right now. So, so if he, hypothetically speaking, if the Niners were to acquire OBJ, Brandon Ayuk plays on what he's playing on now, he still has his 5th year option, that year. You don't necessarily have to move him right away.
I agree. I think they slow play it with Brandon Ayuk, and I think personally, I think it'd be a mistake to trade him away.
I
To
agree.
me, he's a guy who's just getting better every year, and
Brandon Ayuk is nice.
Two quarterbacks who either in Brock Purdy or Trey Lance who are willing to throw it downfield, and so I think that helps a guy like Brandon Ayuk. That's a topic for another day because I do have ideas of who they could trade instead of Brandon Ayuk. But that conversation, it's going to come sooner or later, right? I don't think it's wrong to question it at this point in time. I just question, is Brandon Ayuk the right guy to trade? My opinion, the answer is no. But we'll see what the 49ers decide to do. See, Hind here says, would you trade Ayuk to the Pats for this year's first? That is a 14th pick overall. I mean, that would, I would listen. I wouldn't hang up the phone.
Yeah, I agree with you. You always take the call. I think Hyundai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'd be curious to know what the plan would be, right? Like you make that move with a plan in mind. Are you going to try to get a stud right tackle? Are you trying to get, or a right tackle that's a stud that you can develop or something? Are you doing that for a safety? I'd be curious to know, what the plan is because I'm still not crazy with the fact, even the approach that who's it, not the Bears, the Panthers are taking right now. Let's just trade up and then figure it out. Like we kind of did that with Trey Lance, right? The team has kind of admitted that they didn't really know who they wanted. They just wanted to be at 3. Well, if you're going to make that trade, I think you do so with a position in mind, if not a player in mind on your board already.
Who can be a day 1 starter.
Right.
That one's tough. I don't want to be.
And you're trading a known commodity for like a prospect.
Exactly. I mean, the draft is a crapshoot. We know that. You're getting more in return for Ayuk. I mean, he was a 2nd rounder. You have gotten his services for 3 years. You get more in return. I don't know. That's a tough one. I agree with you, Chris, that like you would have to have some kind of plan in place, right? And not just at whatever position you would hope to draft at 14th overall or whatever pick if someone else wanted to have a similar trade, but also you would have to have a plan at receiver as well, because suddenly you're out one receiver. Who do you bring in? So that, it's interesting. That's a great question though. I do like thinking about it. Uncle Salty says, who else do you think the Niners should trade? I don't know right now. I think they're okay. There isn't anyone I
trade for or trade on trade on the Niners?
I think he meant trade away. There
Okay.
really isn't anyone I would trade away right now. But
I got you. Yeah, I wouldn't right now either. But the team's going to be up against it, though. Like even
They
with
will.
the restructure, even with the restructure that I think is coming for Christian McCaffrey, his next 2 years, because when you're restructuring, you're just pushing that cap hit down the road. He's going to happen. I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey's it. I'm just giving you an example. He'll still have like $16 million cap hits over the next 2 years. Granted, the cap is going up, but Trent Williams' cap hit's about to balloon. Fred Warner's cap hit's going to go up. You got Armstead. Debo's going to start creeping up a little bit. The money for Nick Bosa's impending contract isn't going to kick up that much, but so we're going to be up against it. So it's going to be something. Something's going to, unless we just keep restructuring people, which I don't think is sound practice necessarily either. So, but it's going to be somebody.
The 49ers are going to have to restructure some guys, in the coming days.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised we haven't heard of that yet, to be honest.
I'm sure we will before Wednesday. They probably will, just so they can get those deals signed. Someone said, Bryant said, now we can take Jake Moody from Michigan early. I hope not. I'm not thinking about drafting a kicker early. And I personally, I much rather just bring a free agent in. I think you're more likely to get someone reliable as a free agent than I think like a rookie kicker. I think most rookie kickers don't even see a second contract.
Yeah, and the money is probably not that big of a difference, probably either. Yeah, I mean the money's probably not that big of a difference either from some of the based on some of the contracts I know that are out there, like Pinero's contract, for instance. I think he was making half what Gold was making this year. Yeah, Matt Gay's out there.
Yeah, and Mayoko, I think, pointed out that, Matt Gay's, he mentioned him as former, Rams players that the 49ers could show interest in, which I thought was interesting. Interesting because from the cost perspective, Matt Gay is the top free agent kicker. So you would sign him for more money probably than you would have Robbie Gould, but you're getting a younger player, so there's that. But I thought that was interesting that they would think about
in the production
more at the position.
And I should speak differently, not production from like a statistic standpoint, but just like maybe I should say range or distance, I guess you can say. Yeah.
All right, we are going to end it here because I do have a prospect spotlight interview coming up in a couple minutes, so make sure you guys tune into that. I'm having NC State wide receiver Thayer Thomas on the pod shortly after this, so make sure you guys tune in. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in to this video, and of course, we're going to be covering the free agent, all the moves, throughout this week. It's going to be a really crazy one, really busy one, so we'll make sure to keep you posted on all that. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at Steph49K, at ChrisJ1914 on Twitter. All right, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. See you guys in a couple minutes. Peace.